Welcome back to another episode of the Top Attorneys of North America podcast. Today's topic hits millions of Americans where it hurts most: family, finances, and the reality that sometimes happily ever after comes with legal fees, custody schedules, and a check with the memo that reads child support. The numbers are staggering. Over 1 million divorces were reported last year. About 41% of first marriages end in divorce, second marriages around 63%, and third marriages, let's just say that Vegas has better odds. The pandemic temporarily slowed divorces in 2020, but once the world reopened, so did divorce court calendars across America, and with that rise came a growing need for real support systems for single parents, divorced families, and children caught in the middle. Our guest today says the system has focused far too long on the breakup itself and not nearly enough on what happens after the papers are signed. Joining us is Ron Platt, co-founder and chief executive officer of the National Association for Single and Divorced Families, also known as the NASDF. Ron is a serial entrepreneur with more than 35 years of experience in insurance, real estate, and social advocacy. But what truly shaped his mission was his personal experience as a foster parent and advocate for families in crisis. He has created what many are calling a game changer for the divorce community. Ron, welcome to the Top Attorneys of North America show.
Thank you, Sal. I really appreciate you having me on. This is a great opportunity.
You're very welcome. The honor is ours, sir. And Ron, before we get into the NASDF, tell our listeners about your entrepreneurial background. You spent decades in insurance, real estate, advocacy. What originally drove you towards business ownership?
My dad, he was a serial entrepreneur. My mother and my father had different visions of what my future looked like. My mom wanted me to be, I'm Jewish, so my mother wanted me to be a doctor or an attorney. Never an accountant. She knew I'd be bored with that. And my dad was like, "No, you're going to come to work for me in the insurance business, and I'm going to show you how to make a lot of money and all this kind of stuff." And my mother was like, "No, become a doctor." So I started working for my father over the summers when I was in high school, and I began to see kind of the creativeness. A lot of times when you mention insurance, people go running. I always joke that when I go to a networking party and I was in the insurance business, they'd say, "What do you do?" And I'd say insurance, and everybody would walk away. And then when I got into real estate and they said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Real estate," everybody congregated around me because they wanted to get information. So insurance for many is boring, but there's a lot of different aspects to it. So I went to Florida State University. I got a degree in insurance, from one of the best colleges in the country with regards to insurance. Came out, was supposed to go to work for Hartford, Connecticut, Hartford Insurance Company in Hartford, Connecticut as a junior underwriter. Mistakenly went to lunch with my dad's vice president because I was back home, and she said, "I'm going back to Atlanta. I don't like Miami. I want you to be the new vice president of the company." And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I'm going to go become an underwriter. I've got my whole life planned out. I'm going to learn it from the top bottom." All you have to do is tell a 22-year-old that you're going to make a lot of money, and everything else went out the door. So she showed me how to do everything. I could sell snow to Eskimos. I mean, it's if you give me the product and I believe in it, I can sell it. When I was 18 years old, a buddy of mine owned a used car lot, and I always liked cars. And I went to my dad and said, "Hey, I think I want to sell cars. He can take me to the auction. Can you fund like $5,000? Let me go buy some cars, try it out, blah, blah." My dad, again, as an entrepreneur, was like, "Yep, here's the check." Went, I think I bought 3 cars, sold him, came back, gave him a check for $6,500 and said, "I don't want to sell cars," but he gave me the opportunity. So here I get into the insurance business. I go to work for him. We were working with large employer groups, and we self-funded their health insurance. And then we would find them reinsurance and an administrator to handle the administration. Enjoyed that. When Clinton came into office and said he was going to socialize the healthcare industry, my industry kind of shut down for a little while. So I sold my house, bought an insurance agency, started selling auto insurance and life insurance, homeowners insurance. Got bored with one agency, so I bought 2, then I got 3, then I got 4. And about 6, 7 years into it, I thought there's got to be another way to make a living. Sold that, and then got into product development. And that's where the idea for the association and the divorce insurance came up. My dad and I were having lunch one day, and he was an idea man. He'd walk in every day with a different idea or different concept for insurance. And at the time, we were doing very niche insurance products. So people would come to us with hole-in-one insurance, or where you want to ensure that if somebody hits a hole-in-one, that the $1 million payout's going to be insured, or Keno games in Vegas, or cell phone warranties. And we were always able to place them, or we'd find a market for it. So he's sitting down and said, "Hey, I always wanted to insure child support and alimony for death, disability, involuntary unemployment, and I'll go into this more, and business bankruptcy." And I thought, well, that's genius. That idea I like. And then we had an association we were using for something else. I said, well, why don't we convert the association and cater to people who are getting a divorce or have a single family household? And he said, that's brilliant. He did not want to start the association until he had the divorce insurance product in place. And he tried literally for 30 years. And every insurance company he went to, even companies that were writing what we call credit insurance, which is very similar to what we do, said no, they didn't want to be in the divorce market. And it really pained him to go through the end of his life without having that one opportunity taken care of, because we saw the need for it. From there, of course, from insurance, I went into real estate, and I've been doing that for the last 23 years. But we had put together a business plan for NASDF, and we had the insurance product, we had the actuarial reports, we had everything. We were just A, looking for an investor, and B, looking for an insurance company. And it wasn't until I had run into an investor at a real estate conference that I was at that we started talking, and he got excited about the association, and I had to dust off the business plan and presented it to him, and we went back and forth for about 3 months. And then he came back to me and said, well, if it's such a good thing, why hasn't anybody started it before? He started the association. And I said, look, we model ourselves after AARP. We are the AARP for the divorce and single family market. If they've got 36 million members, why hasn't somebody competed with them? And he said, I get that, we're out. So it really got down to, as I call, brass balls. I had to sit down with my partner and say, look, we got to mortgage the house. I got to get this thing started. It really is $1 billion idea. Let's get it going. He's risk adverse, but agreed to do it when I gave him the pros and cons, and then took out a bunch of credit card debt and stuff like that to start the association. Shortly after I did that, I got a call from a buddy of mine who said, did you ever place the insurance? And I said, no. And he says, I have somebody for you. And the 70-year-old underwriter gets on the phone. And I love these older guys because they were the original risk takers, right? They said, what's the premium? What's the risk? Will the premium help offset the claims and whatever? And he underwrote it. He called me back and said, I love this. This is a niche that we've been looking to get into. When can we start? And I remember looking up at my dad, who has since passed, and thought, oh my God, I think I just got this done. So it was an emotional moment because, like I said, it took him 30 years and he wasn't able to do it. So the association launched, and then shortly after that, about 6 months later, we were able to place the insurance, and we put it online, so it's very easy to apply. So we are literally the only association that caters to people who are getting a divorce or have a single family household, and have the only divorce insurance product called Support Insured. So that's how it kind of all came together. It's, you have people that are afraid to take a risk because they're afraid to fail. And I've failed a few times in my 30 plus years as being an entrepreneur, but I've always learned from those things. And I realized that had I started this 30 years ago, it would not have worked. I did not know enough about the market. I did not know enough about the people that were in the process of getting it thing, even though the statistics on divorces haven't changed. You quoted the statistics before, just recently. Those have not changed.
Pretty staggering.
The needs of these people have increased, because when you go to get a divorce, you Google divorce, you're going to get 5 pages of attorneys, and it takes you 6, 7, 8 pages before you get to resources. And since 30 years have gone by, resources have gotten better. We have divorce coaches, we have relationship coaches, we have support groups for men and women. There's a ton of stuff out there that you won't find because you got to go through 5 pages of attorneys before you get to the services. So that's how we got to this point.
Excellent. So your dad is looking down saying, good job.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I feel it.
Good for you. Good for you. Now you describe the NASDF as an umbrella organization for divorced and single families. What types of resources and services fall under that umbrella?
What do people need when they're in the process of getting a divorce besides an attorney? Well, they might not need an attorney. They might need a mediator. Or if you've got a really good relationship with your ex, you're just not getting along, maybe a divorce coach might be in order. You might be able to go online and file for the divorce if it's amicable. You know, there's no children involved, there's no real estate, it's just a simple divorce. People won't know that because their first thought process is, I'm getting a divorce, I need an attorney. So we've got opportunities for you to look at alternative resources to filing for divorce. Then you have, what do people need? If you're an at-home parent and you suddenly have to re-enter the job force after 5 or 6 years, we have a whole career services division that shows you, we have about 25 videos that you can watch that show you how to update your resume, how to fill in that gap from the time that you had your child to the time you have to go back, because that there is value in that time that you've taken off and how it looks on a resume. And then how to negotiate your salaries, how to update your LinkedIn account, how to get in front of a recruiter. And then if you still need one-on-one counseling, they've given us a 25% discount to sit down and talk to somebody. You need real estate services. So one of the things that we've done is, if when you come as a member, if you come to us to say, I need a realtor, and we source that realtor for you, we're going to get a 25% referral fee from that realtor, and I in turn give that 25% back to our members. So the way that works is, if you have, say, $100,000 house and it's a 3% commission, that's $3,000 in commissions. 25% of that, which would be about $1,500, something like that, would go towards your closing costs. So I don't know how many $100,000 houses there are out there, but you can only imagine that it's going to be a considerable amount going towards your closing costs. So definitely call us if you need a realtor. You're going to get a better opportunity to get money towards your closing costs. We have mental health care, free mental health care. A lot of times, either you or your child are going to need some form of mental health care. So at the moment, it's 3 free mental health care sessions with discounted sessions thereafter. When we hit a certain number on our membership, we will be able to increase that to 8 free mental health care sessions per condition. So if you have depression and anxiety, you'd actually get 16 free mental health care sessions. Personally, I think what we find with a majority of the people who are going through the process is that they need somebody to talk to, especially men. Men have a hard time reaching out. A lot of their friends don't have those types of conversations, so they find themselves to be very much alone. That's the time that the mental health care comes in, if they are amicable to letting go and saying, I need help. So we also have discounts for diapers, formulas, computer supplies, school supplies. We have men and women support groups. We have just a 24/7 nurse and doctor hotlines. Aflac worked out a special deal with us that they'll give us their employer products that you can't buy as an individual. If you come through the association, you can get those employer products through us, such as hospital deductible buyback type programs that'll help offset your deductibles on your health insurance, which we all need. The list goes on and on. I call it the Costco effect. The bigger we get, the more products and services we're able to put into the membership, and it doesn't change the price. It's still $19 a month. And then on top of that, of course, you can purchase the insurance. So you can become a member without buying the insurance, but you can't buy the insurance without becoming a member, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then that, of course, is the biggest thing that we have on there. One of the bigger things is Support Insured. And Support Insured is the first of its kind insurance product that guarantees your child support and alimony payments. If the person who is paying dies, becomes disabled, involuntarily loses their job, or has to declare a business bankruptcy, we'll go ahead and make those payments for up to a year. It's kind of a stopgap type of coverage. It doesn't typically take somebody who wants to make payments to go ahead and find another job or fill in that gap where if they were an entrepreneur and they've had to close their shop and declare business bankruptcy, they're going to go out and get a job so that they can continue making those payments. We're giving them a cushion of up to a year to get that taken care of. The premium is not a lot. It's age rated, and it's also based on what your court mandated amount is. So it's not expensive.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. Yeah, and listening to you, it's obvious that one of the things that stand out about the NASDF, it's not just practical support; it's emotional support. You're there Absolutely. You're there for them every step of the way. Why is that important to you?
You know, I've gone through, I call it the undivorce. At the time, the LGBTQ community was not able to get a marriage license, but I still went through the process. I was in a very toxic relationship. You know, I grew up with conditional love. I'm going to walk into my first relationship with somebody that loves me conditionally. There was verbal abuse. I never made enough money. I never did good enough. And then towards the end, there was drugs involved, not on my end, but on their end, there were drugs involved, and it got pretty crazy. So the breakup was just as bad. We listed the house. They went out and got an attorney. I had to hire an attorney. Every time we got an offer on the house, their attorney refused it until literally it went from 990,000 to 560,000, and there was nothing left at the end because of their attorney. My attorney kept saying, "Sell it, sell it," and this was at the time of the Great Recession. So I went from making six figures to nothing within a day, and there was no money for payouts. The money was in the house, and by the time their attorney was done, it was gone. There was nothing. So I had to start from scratch. And there were no resources for me. I felt very alone. My friends were either in healthy relationships or were single, and there were a few that I was able to talk to that understood what I was going through, but it was a very lonely situation. It was during a recession, so I was financially broke. It was bad. And I thought, I've got to be able to formulate an organization that's going to be able to help people in my situation recover quicker and know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And what is my story, and how did I get to the point where I'm at now, where I'm in a healthy 16-year relationship, where I'm loved unconditionally? And I've learned all those lessons. Briefly, you mentioned what the rate of divorces on a second and third marriages are. And I think many times we go from one relationship into another without taking time to breathe and figure out why the first one didn't work.
Yeah.
And I did that. I left my ex and then immediately started dating somebody, and it turned out to be the same person in a different body. And I was able to sit back and go, this feels very odd. There's something about this. It just doesn't feel right. And it did take me 5 years to find my soulmate, because I had to do a lot of work in between. And there are resources for you to do the hard work so that when you go to your second marriage or your second relationship, you're not repeating the same mistakes. You shouldn't be repeating the same mistakes. We are all evolving human beings. So we want to do better and be better. And this is one of the benefits of being a member, is that you have those resources out there.
No, that's excellent. So
Yeah.
in addition to you taking the idea that your dad formulated, you added your real life experiences to the equation, taking the NASDF to the next level.
He was very passionate about the Support Insured product. I was very passionate about the association because I saw the need. I'm also a foster parent. I adopted my son. I got him when he was 13 years old. He's now 37 years old. And I saw what I had to go through when it came time for him to get resources. Seeing a therapist, he would see a different therapist every time he went. And then when he finally came home and told me, I was in a financial position to be able to enable him to get private care, but it was because they couldn't keep the therapists. There were a lot of things that I experienced with him as I went through this process that I realized these kids need some kind of voice. These ad litems are trying their best with family courts, but the family court judges are not listening. Somebody needs to advocate for these kids. This association gives me that opportunity to be an advocate for foster care and family court reform. And then my co-founder, Joy, her passion is in the prevention of intergenerational poverty. There's a lot of great models out there that are showing people how to be able to get off of the SNAP programs and the government assistance programs and be able to be self-supportive. They just need to be expanded upon. And that's the second part of our advocacy, is to be able to help people with that. When I sat with my husband and said, we're going to mortgage the house and create this $1 billion business, I said 3/4 of what we're going to make is going to go back into foster care lobbying, into prevention of generational poverty, into giving companies like myself opportunities to open up their businesses. Because I'm not as pharma, I'm not a crypto, I'm not an app. Finding somebody to invest in something that betters society it's very minuscule. It's like a needle in a haystack. We realize that there's a lot of great companies out there that want to do things like we're doing, but they can't find the funding. We want to be able to help them fund those projects. So
yeah, it's sad almost that something like this hasn't already existed on a national scale.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, literally, if AARP does about $2 billion a year in revenue, 36 million members, and nobody's competed with them. And they advocate for Social Security and Medicare and elder fraud. We've replicated them. I've actually finally reached out to them, contacted them, and they're mentoring us on the project. They love what we're doing. And they's like the same thing you said, why hasn't somebody done this before? And I said, I'm coming to you guys. Nobody's ever competed with you either. So it's kind of that niche where you're helping people, but you can also make money at it at the same time and then give that money back to help them even further. Society is kind of in a very selfish mode right now of everything's about me. I want to be a billionaire. I want to be a zillionaire. I want to trillion. Well, okay, great. But what about giving back to society? Put it back in. These people need to get a fresh start. And it's not, if you have the resources, it's not that hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a scary time. Divorce, separation. But what are some of the most common fears that divorced parents have when they first come to the NASDF?
Support. They are, when you're a parent, you have a co-parent that's kind of handling some of the responsibility. And now you're a single parent, you have to take on 100% when that child's with you, as does the co-parent when that child is with them. So it's a matter of, I don't know. I had no idea how much my partner was doing, and now I have to take it all upon myself. I don't know how to do this. I don't have dad groups or mom groups that I can vet through. I need more resources to be able to take my child to. I can't afford early childhood education. So that, by the way, that is one of the benefits we offer is discounts on early childhood education schools. So it's a lot of resources. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to go to. And now I've got to do it all on my own, especially if you've been an at-home parent and now suddenly you have to go out and get a job and manage the kids at the same time. So I think it's suddenly realizing what your former partner was doing that you did not see, that now you have to take it upon yourself to do 100%.
Yeah, you answered my next question. Are people often shocked to realize how financially vulnerable they are after divorce?
Yeah.
But let me ask you this: have you found that the Support Insured program reduces conflict between divorcing spouses because there's less financial uncertainty?
Yes. Let me just back up. Currently, when you go to get a divorce, at least here in Florida, and I know some other states have this as well, there is a life insurance element to the divorce, which if that person who's paying dies, it usually pays the alimony and child support up until they're 18 or 21. Well, that's fine, but what if they become disabled or they've been laid off with AI? We're hearing big things about people being laid off because AI is replacing their jobs, or suddenly they own a restaurant, the economy changes, they have to close. So what used to happen is that you would have to contact your attorney. The attorney, if you were the payer, you have to go back to court and say, I don't have a job, I can't pay. So there's a attorney fees related to that, but yet you're unemployed and yet you still have to pay the attorney fees. Now you have to tell the person who's receiving, I'm not employed, and we're going to go to court, and the court's going to say, I don't have to pay until I get a job again. Well, what does that person do? So they need that money to offset their rents, their car payments, and everything else. Now they don't have that money. So that's going to cause people to argue. It's going to cause, if you have a good relationship and suddenly finances get in the way, you're going to argue. I always say, have that financial discussion when you're on your second date, which I did, by the way. It's like, what's your credit score? Because you want to make sure that when you get together, you have that discussion of finances. What is your concept? Were you raised with somebody that took a shopping list to go to the grocery store, or were you the one that came in and just thought you knew what to buy when you got there? It's, our lifestyles can be very different based off of how we're raised. So now you take into the equation that the person who's supposed to be paying you the child support and alimony can't do it, and it's going to lead to conflict. This, on the other hand, allows you to go ahead and know that we're good. I don't have to hire the attorney. I'm out hustling, looking for a job. You're going to go ahead and continue getting paid. And once I get a job, things go back to normal. So it kind of settles that discussion down, and everybody seems to be happy knowing that they've got their finances covered.
Sure. I have to imagine that the family law attorneys appreciate that as well.
They've all said to me, where have you been? Like, why hasn't this come out before? And I'm like, because it took us 30 years to find an insurance company to go ahead and do it for us. That's why.
Yeah. You just discussed, financial mistakes that couples make at the beginning of their relationships. What do you think are some of the financial mistakes that couples make immediately after divorce?
Well, of course, they sit down and they say, well, I've paid in everything. You've been an at-home parent. So you don't deserve anything. I've had to pay the rent. I paid the car payments. It's mine, 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 mine. You need to go find your own. That's somebody that's a good reason why you're getting a divorce in the first place, was somebody who has that mentality. Uh,
Hmm.
the other aspect is that if you're an at-home parent or a part-time worker, you suddenly realize that the person you're breaking up with is a majority breadwinner. And now that's not, you don't have that in place anymore. So there's a fear element that goes into it. There is a division of the assets that goes into it. I recently was speaking to a financial analyst as opposed to a financial planner, and they were very specific about sitting down with the analyst saying, look, before you sell your house, you need to figure out, based off of your settlement, can you go out and buy another house, or are you going to be able to afford to rent? What does that look like? Can you buy that person out and still keep the house? And that's what's great about a lot of the financial analysts that we have. They help you sit down and figure that out before you come up with the settlement. A lot of people, again, think, well, we'll just sell the house and we'll each go our separate ways and take our cash or whatever. Well, you might not be able to afford another mortgage because you're not making as much as the other party. I'll give you another example. We had one of our members called us up and said, I'm in a dilemma where my husband makes a majority of the money. He's not giving me the money to file for the divorce. I've gone to a pro bono legal place to see if they can help. Well, then they take my salary and his salary, and we make too much to qualify for free legal. I'm stuck. What do? I don't have the $5,000 to hire the attorney. And I think that's a lot of people find themselves in that situation as well. What we're trying to do to resolve that is, and if anybody out there has any relationships with credit card companies, I'm looking for a card like Care Credit. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Care Credit, but they only
Hmm.
cover for cosmetic surgery and pet care. I think they do deductibles for doctors now as well. I want a credit card that's going to cover for attorney fees, mediation services, and court costs that will allow somebody with a lower credit score to go ahead and apply and be able to have a $5,000 or $10,000 limit, so that if their partner doesn't give them the money, they don't have to go to the family to ask for money, and they don't have to go for free legal. They can just get the credit card and hire the attorney.
Yeah, it sounds like that this business model is just it can be forever growing. I mean, you could
Correct.
constant. I
Somebody
love it.
somebody called up the other day and said, "Do you have a registry, like a wedding registry?" And I thought, "Huh, no. Well, I need everything." And I thought, "That's brilliant." So we now have a Fresh Start registry on there. And by the way, the company who runs the registry will actually contribute some cash to help out a little bit. So that I thought was brilliant as well, where companies can sponsor people in the registry to help them get back on their feet.
Right. I mean, for only $19 a month to have access to all of these services at discounts, like you said, I mean, it's obviously a no-brainer. And one of the things when I did research about you that really stuck out in my mind is you've described yourself as someone motivated by impact,
Hmm.
as much as income.
Hmm.
And obviously, with the NASDF, you've had impact on individuals. Was there a defining moment where you realized that your mission was bigger than the business?
I think it came when I got my kid as a foster parent. I realized that I come from a family that was in the Holocaust. I'm first generation Holocaust survivor, so I've always been told to have a voice and use it. And as an individual, people are not going to listen to you necessarily as a single person, but as a large company or as a large group of people, your voice gets louder. And that's always been my passion, is I can't save this kid with my voice alone. I have to have a lot of people backing me up to get to get a congressman and a senator's attention. I've got to be able to have a large group of people behind me. So that was actually my original motivation to start the association, and then realizing that there are a ton of people out there. There's 26 million single families out in the US that are not being helped out enough. The government's constantly trying to cut back on supplements, and they're constantly cutting back on things that help people. There's no reason why you can't have a nonprofit that's helping to bridge that gap between what the government is taking away from you, what you really need, and what can help bring you to a point where you're self-sufficient. So it was kind of a combination of a lot of different things. I need the larger group to have a bigger voice to advocate for these kids. And oh, by the way, the work that I'm doing is helping these kids. It's helping these families, and they don't have those resources right now. For me, it's exciting. It's exciting to be able to bring companies together to say, give my people stuff. You know,
Yeah.
I want to go to AutoNation and say, my people need cars. Can you give them a 5% discount or some kind of, a free warranty or something, some motivation, because I've got so many members, and be able to, I even called Costco up one time and said, hey, can you give my members a free membership? And they're like, we've got 178 million people. We don't need you. And I'm like, oh, you're right. You don't. You've got 178 million. You don't need me. So,
Right.
but there are other companies that are more than willing to go ahead and try to capture that market and give opportunities that they can't get outside of the association.
Yeah. And again, you answered, or you touched on my next question. You're reading my mind here, because I mean, you built businesses. This feels more like a movement. And I wanted to ask, but you sort of touched on it. You obviously do see the NASDF becoming a national voice in public policy discussion.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, I'm going to be honest. My goal is to be able to sit a congressman down and say, so let's talk about your foster system or your family court system, which is failing miserably in your states. There are successful models that are working in other states. Why aren't you implementing those? Well, we can't afford it. Well, let me share with you how much it's going to cost. And let's look at what you are spending money on that's not helping these children. I could get political and say with a lot of the states wanting to do away with abortion, none of them are talking about what do we do with these kids. They're literally telling you, you have to have this child whether you want it or not. And if you can't afford the child, well, we don't care. It's not our problem. But it is their problem, because those kids will end up in foster care. They will end up in the system. And if your system is failing, those kids are going to fail. And there's no reason for that. So my goal is to be able to get big enough to be able to hold those congressmen and senators and legislatures accountable for their actions and say, hey, you don't want this? Well, then you got to be able to fund this. And we're so big that if you don't do it, people are going to find out.
Do you think America is experiencing a family support crisis overall?
Absolutely. They just cut back on free lunch for the kids. They're cutting back on SNAP programs. They're cutting on all, and again, a lot of people think these SNAP programs are going for people that can afford it and have the money. And yeah, it's a small percentage of people that are taking advantage of the system, but a majority of the people really need those programs. I will go back, when I left my ex, he pretty much lost everything because of his addictions. They foreclosed on his house, they took his car, and this was a person who had a successful career that made great money that declined rapidly. And I had a dream one night that I was at a stop sign and he was knocking on my door begging for food. And I literally woke up in a panic. Okay, so as much as I don't like him, I want to be able to make sure he has food in his belly, a place to live, and a form of disability is some kind of insurance. That was my goal. And going through that process of applying for food stamps for him, I don't know how he would have ever been able to do it mentally. I don't know how a lot of people are able to sit there and answer the questions and follow through and do what they need. It's not an easy program to get in. As much as we are hearing like, oh, they're taking advantage. They're not taking advantage. There's only maybe $600 or $800 that they're getting for food, which if you have a family of four, it doesn't really help that much, right?
That's a week's worth of groceries.
Exactly. I know it's costing me, just for my husband and I, it's like at least $250 a week, right? And we don't even eat meat. We're vegetarians, so it's still expensive. But not only is it hard to get onto, but then you've got the whole Medicaid situation, where I was also able to get him on because he had cancer and he had some health issues. So I had to get him on Medicaid. That is not an easy process. And I just heard recently that they've held back on all new applicants for Medicaid. Well, what do those people do? At least if you were indigent and you went to the hospital had to accept you, and then they would bill Medicaid. Now they're trying to do away with that. Well, what is that? What options does that give us? So when I say to you that I have a relationship with Aflac, and Aflac has a program that pays off part of your deductibles on your health insurance, I would say go to the Obamacare and get one with a higher deductible and then use our AFLAC program to buy back part of that deductible. It's going to be cheaper than paying the extra premium that you're paying for a lower deductible. So we hear the call and we're trying to fill it as best we can or get creative on how to resolve it because the government is just not doing it and they keep taking away more and more and more and people need those services. So I don't, yeah, it's unfortunately a pretty bad place we're at right now.
And just to go back, that was your ex that you were
That was, yeah,
advocating for?
yeah. And I will tell you that my friends were like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And I said, look, once it's done, I'm out. But he's in such a bad shape that I just want to make sure that he is okay, that I don't see him on the street.
You're a
And
good man,
yeah,
Ron.
it was done. What was that?
You're a good man.
Either that or a big shock, one or the other. But
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, after all these years in business and advocacy, what's something people misunderstand about you personally?
that's a good question. I think they question why I'm doing it to some extent. You know, it was again why my friends were asking, why are you helping your ex? And I think it's just something that we, again, I was with that person for 14 years. Not all 14 years were bad,
Yeah.
right? Clearly there were some good times, and he's a human being. And I just spent 14 years with this human being, and I can't see, I don't go be on your own, have us go your separate way. I just want to, I just want to know you're okay. I mean, I haven't spoken to friends, some friends for years, and I just occasionally check in to make sure they're okay. So I think people think, well, you're doing this to create this $1 billion business so that you can go buy expensive stuff. And no, I mean, I literally sat my husband down and said, do we need a big house? It's just the two of us. You know, do I like cars? Yes. Do I want to drive a Ferrari? I don't want to drive a Ferrari. But what I do want to do is be able to leave a legacy. Hopefully that my granddaughter someday will take over. I'm already teaching her at 6 years old that she's going to be a CEO. I'm prepping her because I want to be able to provide that legacy. There's a book I read about I can't remember the title of it right now, but he owned several businesses and he became very wealthy, but it was all about building up his employees to a point where they had a good lifestyle, where they could afford to have their kids in college and know that their retirement was going to be good. And when he was nearing the end of his life, uh, he's now in a wheelchair and they're wheeling him in and he's finally retiring. I think he's well into his 80s. He's finally retiring and all these companies that he had created, they all came under one roof and they were all congratulating him. And he saw what he had created and how many people he had helped and how many families he had helped. And I was reading the book getting very emotional because that's the vision that I have. How many people can I help before I leave this planet to put them in a better situation? And every business I've owned, I've always said to my employees, I want us all to drive Mercedes Benz or whatever that looks like for you, whether it's a house or college education or whatever. Nobody here will make a limit as to how much they can make. Because if you are making good money, I'm making good money, and we all succeed together. The opportunity for people that are out there that end up making it, especially in sales, you get to a certain point where you're making six figures, and the boss says, "Well, I'm going to take your sales and make it smaller." You know, because you're making too much money. Go make the money. Get rich.
Yeah.
I want that because if you're getting rich, I'm getting rich and we're all doing it together. So that's always been my mentality. And I think to your question, some people sit back and say, are you doing it so that you can get to be a billionaire? And the answer is yes, and give most of it away.
Yeah. And listening to you, I definitely believe the latter. Um, I love the passion that you have, and you keep answering, the questions that I have for you because I wanted to ask if the mission changed the way you personally view relationships and marriage, but from what you're telling me is that your view and outlook on life has remained constant.
I've had many challenges, and I'm not going to go into all of them, but I have a saying that says, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because until you're uncomfortable, you can't grow. And every time I get a little complacent or I get a little too comfortable, God or the universe comes in and shakes me up and says, you're not done yet. Here's your next challenge. And when things don't work out the way I expect them to, I have to sit back and think, what was it? What am I meant to be accomplishing? Because that didn't work. Recently, we'd worked with this company for 6 months. and they were very excited about marketing Support Insured for us and the association, and it was just a win-win all around. And we had put a ton of time into it, and when it came time for D-Day, as they say, for us to launch, it turned out to be all a bunch of crap. They were they it was all lies. Everything was a lie, and yet I had spent 8 months. My co-founder and I were spent 8 months working and pouring into this, only for it to have it be complete BS. And at first I was like, I was pissed because it would have given us a lot of revenue to be able to expand and do other things. And now that had washed away, and I had to take the day off the next day. But then I thought, no, there's a reason why this didn't work out. And literally the next day, I got a phone call from somebody else saying, hey, how about this opportunity? And I thought, well, I would never have seen that had I taken the other opportunity. So
Nice.
there, at my lowest, when I did not have money for food during the recession, I thought I still can get out of bed. I can still work. I have to come up with some affirmations. I've got to be able to, and I know this, a lot of this sounds silly for some people who are at the bottom. The only thing I had were my daily affirmations, my gratitudes, and what I saw for myself in the future, knowing that if I stay focused, downsize, and make the sacrifices I need, I'll get to that point. And I've gotten to the point, and I've succeeded at it. And then I came out of a childhood that where I, like I said, where I was loved conditionally, got into my first relationship loved conditionally, and realized when I get into my next long-term relationship, I've got to learn how to be better and how to be loved unconditionally. And I went through that process, and I did the hard work, and I journaled, and I went to therapy and all that kind of stuff. And I met the person. I met this wonderful person who I've been with for 16 years, who I can't imagine being with anybody else because I did the work. And I think a lot of times people are afraid of being uncomfortable. And two things: it's okay to fail and get uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely not silly.
No,
Definitely words to live by.
yeah.
Uh, are you going to write a book?
It's funny because I do some of these podcasts and I'm writing articles and stuff, and voice in my head said, you should really write a book. So
Yeah,
yes, I think I'll get around to eventually writing a book.
good. I think you should. Uh, little philosophical. If you could change one thing overnight about the divorce process in America, what would it be?
You're not alone. Get people to understand that there's a support team out there for you that might not look what you think it looks like, but it's out there, that you're not alone. This is a very scary process you're going through. It's terrifying. I can't tell you how many people have said, I just don't want to be alone. So I'll be with anybody as opposed to being by myself. Understand that I would like to change the process of that mentality. Like, it's okay for you to be alone, because you're not. You've got a support team. You've got mom groups out there, dad groups out there, single groups out there. You've got therapists. If you can't afford a therapist, go to the support groups. They're free. Know that you have somebody to back you up. And that's what we want to make this whole association about. Is that's what I'm trying to change. You're not alone, and there are resources out there.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's an overwhelming feeling going through a divorce. Um, on a lighter side, decades helping families navigate chaos, whether through insurance, through the NASDF. What's your personal secret to staying sane, being grounded?
Ah, yeah, great question. I've had to learn different techniques. So I believe that there are success models for you to follow. I mean, when I was in the insurance business, remember I didn't take that job with Hartford. I went with my dad. So success came to me a little easier, not because of him, but because of the opportunity that I had to work for him, but I still had to do everything on my own. I was not on a paycheck. I had to earn a commission. I had to make the sales and everything else. I was just given an opportunity. But I also became very cocky when I was in the business. And when I got into real estate, I was fortunate enough to partner up with somebody. And she said, if we're going to have a successful partnership, we need a coach. And I'm like, I don't need a coach. I've been marketing for 16 years. I know everything there is to know. And we went to see this guy. His name is Brian Buffini. And Brian is a big coach within the real estate business. And I saw this Irish guy get up on stage, and he tells a story about coming to this country with $75 in his pocket. And he proceeds to have a motorcycle accident and incur $250,000 in medical bills. And he says, "Welcome to America." And I was listening to the story and realized this man has a $10 million home in La Jolla, California, and a highly successful coaching company. I should probably shut up and listen to what he's telling me and do what he's telling me to do. And what was he telling me to do? He was telling me to nurture my clients because referrals are better than door knocking. He also said, "I am a very wealthy man, but my wife and I are going to give a majority of our wealth away. My kids will be fine. They're all going to have great jobs, and they all financially will be fine." He says, "But we're giving our money away to charity. The one thing that I want to make sure my kids get are my journals, because those are my successes, my failures, my thoughts, my prayers." He said, "Everything's in those journals." And I thought, wow, what am I leaving my kid? And that is what got me to start journaling my thoughts. And I've been doing it for the last 20 somewhat years. And during the toughest times, that's when I journaled the most, because I had to pour myself into, I couldn't afford a therapist, but I poured myself into those journals. And they had a lot of tears and a lot of successes and a lot of visions as to what my future was going to look like. Then I got into real. Then I got we franchised with Keller Williams, and Gary Keller wrote a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. I'm not plugging any of this, by the way, but and in that book was, here's how to run a successful real estate team. Here's how to run a successful business. And I thought, well, he's got a franchise, he's got millions of dollars. I don't have any of that. I should read the book. And then I started having a successful business. So what between my coach and between this guy who wrote this book, I realized there's a bunch of information out there from people that are more successful that I need to learn from. And that's when I became humbled and I became learning based. And I thought, who else is out there? So even when I came to St. Pete, I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida, the first thing I did was join the chamber, and I got involved in a leadership group because I want to learn from other leaders besides myself. So learning from people that are more successful, that have gone through it, you realize that there's models that are in place that you don't have to create. Yeah. Follow the ones that make sense for you, right? AARP. For years, I've been trying to get in touch with them, and somebody in my leadership group is working for AARP, and she says, "You don't want to talk to me, you want to talk to the regional director." Kidding, funny enough, 8 floors above from my office building where I am now. Met the guy, loves what I love. He says, you are doing the exact same model we did. I said, well, it's a successful model. Why would I try to recreate it? So learn from others and realize that there's people out there that have gone through what you've gone through and succeeded through it. Learn from those people. Ask them. I had a friend of mine who was thinking about becoming a psychologist, and he was going back and forth. And I said, well, who is the psychologist or your star psychologist? Like, who do you look up to and say, I want to be like him? And he said, oh, it would be this guy so-and-so. And I said, pick up the phone and call him, have coffee with him. He's like, oh, we can't have coffee with me. I mean, he's like a big shot. I'm like, go call and have coffee with him or have a Zoom call with him. No, I can't. Well, I kind of egged him on, and he finally had a Zoom call with the guy. He was like, his mind was exploding. I like, people who are successful want to talk to you. They want to share their knowledge, or most of them do. Don't be intimidated. Call somebody up and have a cup of coffee.
I love it. I love your outlook. It hasn't all been uphill. I love the fact. You've been through what would have destroyed a lot of other people. I definitely applaud the success that you've seen, and especially the fact that it hasn't been easy, because I think that now you truly appreciate what you're building, and I think that's the most important thing. For our listeners, whether they're going through a divorce, or if it's a business or a community service organization that's listening and saying, hey, I want to be a part of this model, what's the best way for them to do so? Is there a specific number or a website that they should go to?
So our website is nasdf.org. All of our socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, NASDF.org. You'll see podcasts, YouTube, we're everywhere. If you want to reach out to us direct, go info@nasdf.org. And we are constantly adding partners to our programs, constantly adding vendors, as long as you if it's something that we know our members need, not just anybody, but something we know we need, and you're going to give us a discount and be able to really service our members well, we're looking for partnerships at all times. We're also still looking for investors as well. So if there's anybody out there that say, wow, what a great model, I want to be part of that, please reach out to us, because We're growing, but we want to grow faster, which requires more funding than we currently have. And if you're out there, let's listen. But we want you to understand that if you're out there and you're an investor who wants to help society and help take some of that money that you have and be able to help other people grow and better their lives. That's what we're looking for.
Yes.
So info@nasdf.org.
And for family law attorneys as well that want to.
Absolutely. Yep.
Excellent. I'll make sure that I highlight all of your contact information. And Ron, again, this was an incredibly important conversation. The divorce statistics may sound like numbers on paper, but behind every percentage is a parent trying to rebuild, a child that's just trying to adjust, and a family trying to redefine what stability looks like. And what you're doing through the NASDF and Support Insured goes far beyond business. It's about restoring dignity, reducing fear, giving people support during some of the hardest moments of their lives. And I really think that the biggest takeaway from today is that divorce may end a marriage, but it should never end protection or hope of a family. And Ron,
I call it new beginnings.
Yes, sir. I really have to give you a very, very special thank you for joining us and sharing your insight with us today.
Thank you, Sal. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to get the word out.
Thank you for listening to the Top Attorneys podcast. The Top Attorneys celebrates the achievements of leading attorneys across the nation. To be featured, send a message or visit www.topattorneys.us.